So this is now about what, 26 years in the making since the
Sheesh.
conclusion of X-Men the animated series to now the premiere of
Yeah.
X-Men 97. I don't know if any of us could have forecasted this or have predicted that this would be the state of events coming out of a few years ago when this was first announced, but alas, here we are. X-Men 97 is a continuation of the groundbreaking animated series that premiered in the 90s. You know, X-Men the animated series was really kind of a trailblazing comic book animated superhero series. And what's interesting is that it premiered about a month before Batman the animated series in 1993. So at the exact same time, from both Marvel and DC, you had these two really groundbreaking shows presenting their comic book heroes to a more mainstream audience. And X-Men the animated series in particular was a part of the Fox Kids programming block, which also again aired Batman the animated series as well as a slew of other shows. But for the 5 seasons that it ran from 1993 until 1997, despite the production issues, despite some of the setbacks and all of the changes that occurred throughout the course of its airing, it really sort of set the stage for, I think, the current comic book era boom that we've experienced for the past 25 years, particularly
Mhm.
in live action. You know, I think it's safe to say that the X-Men movie that came out in 2000, Bryan Singer's X-Men, would not exist without the blueprint that was set a few years before with X-Men the animated series. And so there's a lot of credit that I think needs to be given to that show that's already been done over the years. But I want to start with you and just kind of ask, what's your relationship to X-Men the animated series? How close in proximity to that show were you? How often did you watch it? Did you get a chance to rewatch it? And overall, how did it paint, I guess, your love and adoration for these characters and ultimately for other characters that came into live action through Marvel?
X-Men, X-Men, X-Men. This show, uh, to be honest, a lot of I think the influence that I draw from is all family related. My older cousins were always nerds before I was, and I really inhaled everything they inhaled. And X-Men, the animated series, was absolutely and definitely one of them that I remember watching as a kid, and again, vaguely knowing what's going on, but also again, the show was predates me technically. So you know what I mean? Like you still gotta rewatch eventually to figure out what's happening in this TV show. But I absolutely remember watching it with my family and just loving the characters. Not only that, but what also brought me to love the cartoon even more was we're big gamers. And there was so many X-Men games coming out on like Sega Genesis. And like, I mean, it was I remember going to the dentist office with my cousin. They had like a Sega Genesis just sitting in the sitting in the doctor's office while you wait, and you could just play X-Men. I would use Psylocke, and it was just crazy. And so I was connected that to X-Men the animated series as well, man. But nothing was as iconic as hearing that opening theme. That was one of the biggest things. That, and also our family, we frequently went to Universal Studios where we seen Wolverine and Storm and Cyclops on a lot of the I guess billboards and things that they had around the theme park. And so again, it's all connected back to what I had seen on the television screen with X-Men the animated series. And the series has changed so much. And not only changed itself, but you speaking about how this did premiere before, like Batman the animated series and things like that. It was a lot to contend with at the time. And X-Men really changed the game first and foremost with their costumes. That was like at the time some of the campiest costumes that we had gotten in popular culture, to be honest. And of course we dumbed it down back when we did go to the Bryan Singer's 2000s, but at that time, seeing Cyclops and Wolverine in the blue and yellow, and Wolverine with the tiger stripe, it was like different for that time. And again, it changed so much, man. And so my relationship with X-Men, it runs deep. I've always loved the characters. And a lot of people have also went into lengths talking about, oh, I like X-Men more than Avengers and this and that and this and that. But technically in my life, X-Men came first. I love the Avengers, but X-Men did come first. And that's just how it was. And I grew up with those cartoons. Growing up, there was no Avengers cartoon. You know what I'm saying? We weren't talking about no Avengers cartoon in the 90s. That wasn't a thing. We were talking about X-Men in the 90s. And so here we are. It's been amazing, I think, to see the show mean to as means so much to this many people as it does to me. And I think that I just like how popular this became, because this isn't just like some only comic book watcher thing. I think X-Men the animated series was one of the things that got people to get into some of the nerd content. To get into, what is this? This is a cartoon. X-Men. That's a comic book. It was just a lot. And so yeah, man, I love it. I hope I know other people love it, and so yeah, I'm happy to be here. I really am. So X-Men '97 is here, and yeah, I'm just happy. I'm happy.
Certainly. Want to quickly fact check myself. So Batman the animated series, that's the one that premiered first. That came out a month before, but they certainly premiere within a
Same
month of
time.
each other. But ultimately, looking back on this time, which is such a fine time for my life, Batman the animated series and X-Men the animated series, they serve as my origin story for my fandom for all of this. These were the two shows that defined my childhood for so many years and really opened up my love and adoration for both Marvel and DC. And it's just crazy that they occurred at the exact same time, and they were really speaking to a demographic of people that had been very much interested and into comic book reading, but had never been serviced in a mainstream way in particular. And of course, these shows aired on Fox Kids, so primarily these were created and geared towards younger audiences. But I think quickly, once they premiered and once these shows got into the rhythm of their runs, fans quickly saw like, oh, well, wait a second, I can enjoy this too, even though I'm an adult or I'm a teenager or whatever
Mm-hmm.
the case may be, because not only are they tackling some of the most beloved characters and arcs and runs from the comic book source material, but also they have really, really great writing, and they have compelling characters and long developed storylines. Like, this stuff pays off if you stick with it. And both of those shows in particular were able to achieve that and do that. And X-Men the animated series, it was operating under I think less resources than Batman. Batman had a significantly
Mm-hmm.
larger budget. X-Men the animated series was plagued with production issues. There's so much that's been written and talked about and developed behind the making of that show, to where they had very little to work with, but they still managed to pull out something that became iconic, whether it's the song, whether it's the characters that are depicted in the show and the way that we remember them, the arcs that they tackled. I mean, they tackled literally every well-known X-Men arc up until that point, whether it was Dark Phoenix or
Mm-hmm.
Apocalypse or Days of the Future Past. Like, they got into all of that stuff. And it wasn't even supposed to be a 5-season show. They were going to end it after 4, and luckily they were able to get that last season right before things were able to close shop. But once the show was over, as I said earlier, it set the stage for the next few years. I don't know if we get a big budget live action Blade movie in 1998
Mm-hmm.
if people didn't see, if execs didn't see that there was an appetite there on the parts of audiences to want to see comic book characters maybe on the big screen. And then of course, moving on to the Bryan Singer films with Hugh Jackman and Halle Berry and Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart,
Mm-hmm.
those are extremely important, obviously, to just the development and the evolution of comic book films. But all of that foundational work had to be established here. And it's so interesting because I rewatched the entire series before diving into X-Men '97. And in the later episodes, in the later seasons, you can see what I would presume is the very first Marvel Studios logo ever created. And it looks
Yep.
like something created on a Sega Genesis or a PlayStation. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is very much of the time. It's
Microsoft
90s as
Paint.
hell. On Microsoft Paint or something like that. And for now, that same exact studio, obviously in a much different iteration, so much more evolved and successful all
Yeah.
these years later, to be able to come back to where it pretty much all started for them. This was literally the
Mm-hmm.
first production from Marvel Studios. I think it's quite appropriate that it all played out this way, that they were able to say, you know what, we're going to do something that hasn't quite been done before. There have been sequel series and continuations and
Right.
all of that stuff that's happened before. I mean, look at the Batman DC animated universe. I mean, they did Batman the animated series, but then they had Superman and Justice League and
Mm-hmm.
Static Shock. All that stuff was connected. But to go away for like 26, 27 years and to say, like, yeah, we're going to come back, we're going to bring back most of the original voice cast, we're picking up a year after, if that, from where things ended. It's kind of crazy, but that's the time that we're living in. It's such a blessing. It's so incredible that we can revisit this world and show it to a whole new generation of people, especially now considering I think the importance that the X-Men will play moving it to live action in the future of Marvel
Mm-hmm.
Studios whenever those plans do come to fruition. That being said, from what you remember, it can be an episode, it can be a character arc, whatever. Like, did you have a particular set of episodes or moments from that original animated series? What I find funny is how all these
Mm-hmm.
years later, it's come back into public consciousness. You know, everybody has the Wolverine meme. You know, him filling on the picture of Cyclops and Jean Grey. Like that came out of nowhere to me like a few years ago, that all of a sudden that becoming a meme. But here we are. Like
Yeah.
it still resonates. And so you know, do you have any moment from that original show that always sticks out to you as like a fond memory or maybe a favorite arc that they explored?
Uh, what you just said was actually really important. The thruple, the love triangle between Wolverine, Jean, and Cyclops, man. Because the show created that. That was not a comic book thing. That was something that the show got into. And again, speaking of the influence, it propelled us into really what we have now, right? We've seen that instantly in 2000s X-Men, that being the thing, that love triangle. And even now, Loki in the comics, they might be like a real throuple now, like a real triangle. Like I think
Right.
it's for real now in the comics,
Yeah.
but I think that's interesting. But to be honest, man, the popular stuff is the episodes that were the best. Days of Future Past was just a banger when it came out, and it really is some of the episodes I remember the most. Anything having to do with Genosha was always very memorable to me. And of course, this is just Mr. Sinister in particular. A lot of things with Mr. Sinister, but also Age of Apocalypse, because that literally, again, not a thing in the comics yet. It happens in X-Men, the animated series, and they go on to make a whole comic book event with Age of Apocalypse. It's crazy. And then later on, X-Men Evolution ends up adopting Apocalypse, all that. I have a whole X-Men Evolution soapbox I could go on. But man, that's Days of Future Past and a lot of those other things, I think, are a lot of the moments that I do remember the most and have the most fond memory of, because it was just a storyline that a lot of other storylines have tried to adapt since, right? Of course, time travel is a big thing. It has been a big thing for a long time. We talk about Back to the Future all the time, you know what I mean? But also, from a comic book context, Days of Future Past was like, what are we doing? Who's doing what? Who's Cable? Bishop? Who are these characters? And it happens literally season 1. And it's like, oh, this is what we're getting into. And I really believe a lot of those early episodes propel us into everything else, even what we see in today's X-Men 97. So I have to go with some of those.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth. Anytime that they had Cable and Bishop showing up and dealing with Apocalypse, I love that. From the first introduction in that first season all the way until season 4, the Beyond Good and Evil arc, you know, where Apocalypse comes
Mm-hmm.
back. That stuff was amazing. They're in Egypt. I mean, they're just doing so many incredible things. I'll also call out, I mean, this is still probably the most successful adaptation of the Dark Phoenix story
Oh,
happened
it's
in this
not even
show.
close anywhere else.
I mean, because the movies
Not even close.
still twice have not done it,
Still.
but they had like 8 episodes dedicated to the Dark Phoenix. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly how you do it. This is an
You know?
entire saga that needs that time and that investment so that we can really see this play out the way that it needs to. And I'll also call out, you know, the Genosha stuff was great. I love anytime that they did Savage Land stuff as well. That was really cool and interesting
Yeah.
because that felt like it was ahead of its time. Like we still haven't even explored or scratch that surface in live action at all. I would love to see them, you know, probably tackle any Savage Land stuff, you know, maybe in the future with the MCU. But there's really, I mean, it's your choice to pick because there's just so many. I mean, all these episodes
Mm-hmm.
tapped into so many things, so much so that we did see the movies take so much inspiration from them. You already pointed out a couple of examples. I mean, I would bargain to say, and it didn't really register for me until rewatching it again. Now it was like, oh well, wait, the movies, you guys practically took everything from the animated series
Copy
except the
paste.
costumes. That's
Yep.
the big thing that you didn't take that you should have took. You should have
Yeah.
had that. Thankfully, we had Kevin Feige there to fight for the hair for Hugh Jackman. We at least got
True.
that. But
Mhm.
you know, all of that stuff, man, it was so integral to just, you know, mapping out the stories that I think most people have come to know and love about mutants and X-Men and just the infinite amount of possibilities that exist. And so it's a great time for sure to rewatch that show. Before we get into X-Men 97, I think we should talk about it because we haven't had a chance to discuss it. But the showrunner for X-Men 97, Beau DeMayo, unfortunately, he was let go. He was fired by Marvel Studios a day before, or at least publicly it was revealed a day before the Hollywood premiere. So this was like 2 weeks ago. It became a hot topic on social media and in all of the trades. We learned that he was fired. His email was instantly deactivated. He himself also completely wiped all of his own social media footprint out of existence. You can't find him anywhere at this point. And it struck everybody as a very odd move that they would do this the day before the Hollywood premiere. Like, this guy's the showrunner.
Yeah.
Not only that, he has already written season 2 of X-Men 97 and started early development for season 3. And in addition to that, he had supported the Blade production that's currently underway with Mahershala Ali and also provided possible writing credits there, maybe some story punch-ups. And so I think a lot of people saw this information and said, well, they've worked with this guy on numerous projects. It can't be the work. Like, they must like him enough to bring him back for the work. It has to be something else. It has to be something pretty major. Now, nothing has been confirmed, and to be honest, we may never know what the true reason is, but there was a report that came out a few days later that apparently the reason he was let go was for 2 reasons. One, he was allegedly a nightmare to deal with. He was not a great guy behind the scenes, and they had a lot of problems dealing with his personality. Secondly, what was said was that Disney allegedly had some issues with the fact that he had an OnlyFans account. Now, I didn't know Beau DeMayo had an OnlyFans account. I did not go looking for Beau DeMayo's OnlyFans account. I have no idea what type of content he posted on his OnlyFans, but allegedly Disney found that to be quote unquote creepy. The things that he was posting on that platform to be creepy. Again, I can't validate any of this. This is just what's out there. How do you feel about this? The fact that, even in the midst of what I think is a pretty successful and celebrated time for them, having something come back and be so universally accepted and loved, Marvel Studios still cannot buy a win for the life of them. In the midst of even celebrating this moment, they still now have to deal with more controversy and the fact that they lost their showrunner just days before the show came out.
They're going to have to start running Marvel like a military camp, bro. Like, I need them to start, like, you ain't got no choice at this, because they are so unlucky, bro. But also, there needs to be better checks and balances, I guess, for what they want in some of these people. I really, it's so crazy that they keep going through this. One of the cool things about, the job I work as an engineer is my coworkers are pretty cool. And I've always been very interested on how my company is able to, like, find all these really cool people that, like, are just nice. And it's like Marvel can't do that. Like, they can't just, like, find normal people that are, and maybe that's a hard thing to do. But again, I don't know if they need to start hiring private investigators, I don't like, is the psych evaluation not good enough? Like, should they start going on retreats you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what else they're supposed to do in order to get it right, but they have been going through it. And Beau DeMayo is just another iteration of that. Hopefully, again, this is asking a lot, but hopefully he's the last. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is so unfortunate. This big show comes out and it's like, oh yeah, but our main writer who wrote the first 2 seasons is gone now. I mean, you can't find him anywhere. I mean, there's no Twitter, no Instagram. I'm pretty sure there's no wiki page. Pretty sure, like, it's impossible to find. And so, to me, that means that Disney was like, oh, we got to catch this before something comes out. You got to throw them out the window, because if somebody else catches it before Disney does, Marvel, what are y'all doing? What is this? Why didn't y'all catch this before? But I think they're trying to stay on top of it in order to cover their bases. But man, I really don't know what's going on, but they got to figure it out soon.
I have a theory of what's going on here. I think that in the first 10 years of Marvel Studios properly, once Iron Man kicked off the MCU and we were in the Infinity Saga, I don't think that they dealt with this issue because they had much less to manage. They had significantly less productions to manage, which thus means they work with technically a lot less people. But with the creation of Disney Plus and the mandate that we talked about last week, create as much as you can, as fast as you can, now you have to hire significantly more people to work on the countless amounts of shows and movies and other productions that you have underway, which then causes you, I think, to start working with people that you probably wouldn't have otherwise hired, or at the very least you would have spent more time investigating background, seeing if they're a good fit. But because the pipeline is just so jammed and so backlogged, and there's just so much more, or at least it was, for the past few years. I mean, they have to fill these positions. They have to get people to do
Yeah.
these jobs. You have to cast people. You have to cast hundreds and hundreds of people for individual productions. You have to get all of the
Mhm.
writers in the writers' room, and the directors and the showrunners and the producers, not to mention all the below the line people, the tech crew. I mean, there's just so many people. And of course, you're going to work with those, who you find reliable. You're going to go back to those relationships that you built, but you also have to bring in new voices, because that just is the necessity of the situation because of all the stuff that you're developing now. And I think that an extreme situation is Beau DeMayo, where it's like, this just might not be a great personality fit. We got to let him go. But on a much smaller level, I think we see people that they hire for the past few years working on some of these shows that maybe they're not huge fans of the comics. Maybe they don't really know the
Mhm.
material. They
Mhm.
have an interesting take, but are they actually somebody who's passionate about this character?
Right.
Or maybe it's somebody that's slightly inexperienced, doesn't have as much experience dealing with these really big budget tentpole projects. But look, we need a showrunner, we need a new voice, we need somebody here. So again, I just say all that to say that I don't think that this is an issue, and it really wasn't. We didn't hear about any of this for the first 10 years. The only
Right.
person was Edgar
Mhm.
Wright. Like that was the only guy who left. Everybody else,
Right.
it worked out for the most part. Or at least if they had to make a change, it happened well before things were underway. Ava DuVernay was going
Mhm.
to direct Black Panther. She stepped away well before production started, and Ryan Coogler stepped in. Right, so
Mhm.
I don't know if they really have had that luxury, just due to the necessity of the pipeline has to keep moving, and you're moving really fast, making decisions quickly, hiring people, spending a little bit less time getting to know them, because look, we got a deadline to meet. We got these production schedules we got to meet. And so it's unfortunate, and it sucks that it happened at the time that it did. But as you said, it looks like that they had to make a choice very quickly, and do it so that it didn't come back to bite them, and they can really focus the attention on the show. I'll just say this before we get into it. It'll be very clear and evident. Despite Beau DeMayo, I don't know the guy. I don't know him personally. I don't know any of the validity behind any of that stuff. He clearly loves this shit, because
Yeah.
everything looks great to me. Spoiler alert for my
Mhm.
review coming shortly, but like,
Yeah.
he did a really good
He's
job.
about it.
So
Yeah, he's about it.
it's a loss nonetheless, regardless of what he was doing in his personal time. So
Mhm.
folks, with all of that out the way, let's go ahead and officially dive in and officially talk about the brand new continuation of X-Men the animated series, X-Men 97. Now, this series is created by Beau DeMayo, and it's starring a voice cast of Ray Chase, Jennifer Hale, Cal Dodd, J.P. Carlack, Lenora Zahn, George Buza, many, 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 many others also a part of this voice cast. And as I mentioned earlier, many returning members of the original X-Men the animated series have come back. Now, we're going to get into spoilers. We're going to talk about all the details within the first two episodes that premiered on Disney Plus. But before we do that, just in case you have not watched X-Men 97, you're still safe, because we're just going to start and give our brief overall thoughts about how we felt about this 2 episode premiere. So before we dive into spoilers, man, what do you think about the 2 episode premiere of X-Men 97?
Wow, who would have thought we would be here when X-Men 97 was, I guess, introduced, was announced? I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was excited. And what's funny is, ever since then, almost every excitement has been a letdown, or I wasn't excited by the time it came out. Thinking about it, like, I don't know about that. I think the closest was in recent memory has probably been Black Panther. I still really liked Black Panther 2. But this thing here, man, X-Men 97 is probably my favorite project. I don't know, it might not even be close, but it's already probably my favorite project of this phase. Whatever, if this is part of the phase, I don't know, but I hope it is, because hopefully this is the turning point of what is soon to be more back to riches for Marvel. I absolutely love X-Men 97. It's doing everything that I thought it would do and hoping that it would do, plus more. In when we first started talking about, or we talked about this at length actually, but when we talk about Marvel and the things that they need to take care of, the characters that they need to take care of, you could have a bad Marvel's movie, you could have a bad Ant-Man 3 movie. You know what I'm saying? Like that stuff is excusable. A couple things you can't have bad at this point in Marvel's shoes. You can't do bad Spider-Man. You just can't do it. That's your baby. You have to take care of it. You can't have bad Fantastic Four. Still has to happen, but you got to take care of it. The third thing, you cannot have a bad X-Men. You can't do it, whether it's animated, live action. If you have bad X-Men, everything goes to shit. And I'm here to say that gladly that is not the case. X-Men 97 has been handled with care. It has everything from the animated series of the 90s. It has the animation of it, but it has been matured almost as similar as some of the other shows I've talked about on here, whether it's Fiona and Cake, how Adventure Time was an older show and it had been slightly matured for newer audiences while maintaining the older, the old pizzazz, that old spirit, that old essence. That's exactly what X-Men 97 is doing. It's doing all of those things. It's keeping everything that you love from the 90s, but it's 2024. It's some new things to talk about. It's some new animation to get into and some new storylines to go down. And it does it so well. It's taking so many risks while also, again, maintaining, I think, that level of what we love so much about the 90s. This is what I wanted it to be. I can't wait to see more, but all in all, X-Men 97, for right now, in these first 2 episodes, I think they're firing on all cylinders. And as the departure of Beau DeMayo, I hope the writing remains as tight as it has in these first 2 episodes. But they have been doing the damn thing, and I'm very proud to say I like the show a lot.
Man, holy shit. Like, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect X-Men 97 to be this damn amazing. Like, if I'm just being completely honest about it, I was excited. I have so much love for X-Men the animated series, but to think that a continuation all these years later could be so damn excellent almost in every way, it really shocked me after watching the first 2 episodes. Like, well, wait a second, this is probably going to supersede anything that they even did in the 90s, because let's be honest, nostalgia is a hell of a drug, and we can look back on something very lovingly, but we also can still poke out the flaws, and X-Men the animated series has a ton of flaws. Most notably, I think everybody will call out the animation and just some of the shortcuts that they had to take to get across the finish line. But now that is no excuse anymore, X-Men 97 is fucking fantastic. It is some of the best work that Marvel Studios has done in the past 5 or 6 years. It's actually kind of crazy how I think with this series, we are getting the best of both worlds. On one hand, you're getting the loving tribute, the nostalgia trip for something that is so beloved to pop culture, to the public, to comic book fans, to X-Men fans. But on the other hand, you're still getting something that feels almost completely new and different and feels refreshed and feels like it's looking forward. And it's perhaps the most faithful and loving adaptation of X-Men characters that we've gotten. I don't know since when, like maybe ever. Like I if you really put this next to the live action movies from an adaptation standpoint, they're not really touching this in terms of the character depictions and how their mannerisms are and the things that you know them for, the power displays, the arcs that they choose to adapt, and just all of that stuff. It's really, really working here. I mean, there's so much care and thought and attention into all the small details here. And I think that they're even super self-aware about how we perceive some of these characters in the show, and they've addressed some of those things in very clever ways with the writing, which is exquisite. It's fantastic writing. This can appeal to all audiences because they obviously are going after younger generations who maybe don't know as much about X-Men, and they want to give them a palatable way into this universe and expose them to what this could be. And not only that, you also have access to all the old episodes through Disney Plus, and so you create this new ecosystem for people to live in if they choose to, and just explore both at the same time. And then you're also opening it up for fans of the long time fans of the characters and of the series to say, like, well, wow, this is some of the most thoughtful X-Men storytelling that I've seen in this form in a very long time. And so they're killing it. And these 2 episodes really have set the bar, I think, incredibly high for what this show could be, not only for this season but for future seasons. And what Marvel animation as a division can be, which I'm now super excited about. What If was cool. It served its purpose, but this is what I want to see. More of this. And that's not to say like more continuations. We don't necessarily need a continuation of Spider-Man the animated series, but
Right.
there was a Marvel boom period for animation in the 90s. They not only had X-Men, they did have Spider-Man, they had Silver Surfer, they had a Fantastic Four cartoon. All of these things are so integral to comic book storytelling and our relationship to these characters, because there's just so much you can do in animation that you just will never have the opportunity to do in live action. And there's also a bigger roadmap to what you can play with, because at a movie you only have 2 hours, which, you know, it's great, but sometimes you need more time, you need more roadmap, you need more story and connections with these characters to really tell that story in a meaningful and satisfying way. So I'm kind of shocked at how good this is. I'm not gonna lie. I just didn't think it could reach these highs, but the fact that they have, oh, this is a wonderful time. I think that this is exactly what we needed at this moment. This is something that we really needed to latch on to and love. And to be honest, I wasn't even planning on us covering it in this way, but it's like, well, wait a second. Y'all are telling us something different. We got to spend some time talking about this now, because it's a lot to unpack here. So I can't wait to dive into it. But folks, if you've not seen the first 2 episodes of X-Men 97, this is your official spoiler warning. Go watch those episodes, go check them out, and come back and finish out the rest of our conversation. And we should just start off, I think, from the most obvious place. This is, again, a direct continuation from X-Men, the animated series. It picks up, I think, less than a year after the events of that original animated series when it ended. And presumably, Charles Xavier is dead. He's gone. What's interesting here is that he doesn't technically die in X-Men, the animated series. We don't ever see him die. He goes away, but I guess we're just like, dead. I guess we're just presuming he's gone, dead, far away,
dead, away, gone
somewhere. But they act like he's dead in the show. Like, they very much are like rest in peace type energy in the show when it starts off. Like, people are like, yeah, man, now the professor's like, what are we gonna do? And I don't know. They can always play with that. And even in the intro, you know, we see his title card, we see him pop up, although that goes away. But you know, now that I say that, I mean, how do you feel about the remixed intro? You know, it's very much the same thing, you know, of the opening animated song. Like, they know it ain't broke, so it ain't nothing that we got to fix here. But they do make some small changes. A couple of new characters get added in. The music is slightly different, but it's mostly the same. How did you feel about it when it first opened up?
Yeah, man. It's what I needed. It's what I needed to get into the show. You could not start any other way. But I love how all the updates were so subtle. They added Bishop in there, which is nice. Storm has a mohawk now, which I still have thoughts about. I've never been like the biggest Storm has a mohawk fan. I've always liked the goddess with her luxurious white hair. You know what I'm saying? That's always been my Storm. The Storm I like a little bit better, but Storm has a mohawk now. And the music is the music, man. All they did was like, they just updated it. People have speakers now. You know what I'm saying? Like, all they did was kind of update it, make it more dynamic across the board. It sounds a little bit more full, you know what I mean? And yeah, they brought it up to date, but the opening is exactly what I needed it to be. I know some people had like very small nitpicks for like the music, but I was like, nope, this is fine. This sounds good to me, and I'm glad that they updated it. So yeah.
The music is great. The intro is one of the most iconic intros to, I think, any TV show that we've ever seen. I don't know why the fuck Disney Plus still has that skip intro button at the bottom. I don't need that.
Not for this one.
I'm looking past that every single time. I mean, I'm literally looking at that with disdain on my face. Like, skip what? This? No, I'm watching this every single time. And now it's in widescreen. It's in 4K. You get more frames. Everything looks beautiful. You get the changes in some of the characters. The budget is obviously upped and increased. I remember in the original animated series when Beast's his title card comes up, he just has like a line behind him. It's just like the horizon line. There's no depth. There's nothing, because they didn't have any budget for anything else. Here, it's like, oh, we got trees and woods and forests. Like, let's make it a little bit more lavish. We got more money to spend. It's just the small things like that where it's like, yeah, now we're in 2024. We can do a lot more here. So I love what they do here, the small changes, but of course, you know, keeping it the same as it should be. But again, you know, to go back to how things are, I mean, the mutants, the school, Xavier School, they're kind of dealing with his absence now, trying to figure out what the state of the X-Men is going to be. And we're seeing Cyclops and Jean Grey kind of wrestle with their fate and what their place is. They are the first recruits, and Cyclops is struggling to live up to that legacy of Charles and trying to be a leader to the team. And I think that this is an interesting avenue to explore, because Cyclops he's not had the greatest representations when it comes to an adaptation standpoint. Like, I don't think we've seen the best of Scott Summers, but I think we're starting to turn a corner here where it's like, oh, well, we know the guy is kind of like a cop, he's kind of square, he's not, he's a disciplinarian. He's a bit of a square, but that's why we should like him. And because he is like so strict and he's such a leader, that's what makes him great. So how did you feel about just like some of those opening moments, seeing Scott and also Jean, who's now pregnant, which is a new development as well, start to kind of wrestle with the fate of like what their futures are going to be, whether or not they're going to stay with the team, and how the X-Men are going to shake out?
What a cool, I think, problem to have, because they do say it later in the episode. I think Jubilee is like, Cyclops and Jean are the first X-Men. What what would we do if they leave? You know what I'm saying? And that's a good ass question, because I know it ain't gonna be Gambit. I know it ain't gonna be Rogue. It sure as hell ain't gonna be Logan. You know what I'm saying? Like, none of these people are fit to lead, like, for real, for real. Like, no, if anybody, it should be Storm. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's just so interesting. It's such an interesting way, I think, to enter the absence of Professor X. And man, you said it. He has not been represented correctly yet in terms of adaptations, like, at all. And I'm so glad this TV show is finally like getting it together, because the comic bookers, they know, what I'm saying? They know, like, no, Scott's kind of him in the comics. Like, he has a lot of to be honest, really good energy that Professor X passed down to him in the comics, and you can kind of see it starting to manifest here. And again, I'm really happy they're starting to do that. But again, I really love this dynamic, because it's like, it's all about family, right? And they're like, ooh, in keeping your child safe, what that means for the X-Men in the future is just like, yeah, I love that they're going through an existential crisis, because how could you not when the person that the school is named after is absent? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a really good start and a good way to grab in viewers, to be honest.
Yeah, it was appropriate to kind of shift the perspective of the show in the beginning, at least, to Scott and Jean. I think that just made the most sense. It feels like a lot of this season will revolve around them and their choice and what's going to come next for them, especially considering what happened at the end of episode 2. But again, I think that this was important also to establish, just to show fans who might not be as familiar with these characters from the comics, like, no, there's a lot to them, because, yes, we have not seen the best representations of them in other mediums, but no, these are some of our most compelling characters here. Like, they are really the foundational pillars of everything that Charles built with this school. And I love that they had the photo in the background. It very much resembled like an old Jack Kirby style painting, those first original X-Men, just those small, subtle things that they added in here. And then, of course, the dynamic between Scott and Jean, to see where they are now, a lot older, a lot more wise and ready to kind of move on and accept that next phase of their life, especially considering that Charles is gone. And now they have to really wrestle with that concept. Like, what are the X-Men? What are we going to be? Who are we going to be to them? Maybe it's time that they start to establish their own new identity. Maybe this is like a New Mutants sort of transitional stage that we're entering into. Like, all of that stuff is on the table, certainly. One of the other things that I loved about this episode, we get the introduction of Roberto da Costa, who is known as Sunspot.
Yeah.
In the comics. He has a very, very important role in the show. And after he's saved, there's a lot of callbacks to the original X-Men, the animated series, like the way that he's brought into the mansion when he wakes up. Like, it's all a direct callback to how Jubilee was introduced into the X-Men. He wakes up in the same room. The first mutant that he sees is Beast hanging upside down. Like, all of those small things. And of course, we get a moment, with the X-Men, kind of talking to him about what's going on with the Friends of Humanity. But there's a whole sequence where they have to rescue him. There's a whole moment where we get the action early. They're at this warehouse and they have to rescue him from the Friends of Humanity, and they come into contact with a lot of Sentinel tech. And we see Cyclops in action. We get to see Storm in action. We get to just see all of those powers very early in the show come into play. How did you feel about that moment? Like, within the first few moments of the episode, it's like, oh yeah, the X-Men, they're out in the field. Like, we're getting that action going immediately.
Yeah. First, starting with Roberto. I need us all to remember Roberto's black. He's Afro-Brazilian. I love that. But we like, he's a little darker. You can kind of see it, but Roberto, he's here, man. And you said it, he's the new Jubilee. And I think it's really cool because you mentioned this show was also doing something to try to get new younger kids into X-Men, right? And a lot of people started with Jubilee. And I think a lot of people will start with Roberto or Sunspot. And I think it's cool to kind of make that comparison in a new age, especially now. It's like they're also pushing Jubilee. Like Jubilee, you also got to bring them in too. I think that's really cool, especially going with your New Mutants point. It's like, dang, this is genius that they're doing this like this. I really like that because Roberto really is an important member of X-Men. I think he's Avenger right now, which is crazy in the comics. But also I wanted to point out something real quick. He said something that was like a little left eye. He said something to the member of the FOH, right? The whatever of humanity.
Friends of Humanity, yeah.
The Friends of Humanity guy, where he was like, I'm one of the good ones. I was like, if you don't quit trying to be a coon out here and trying to pay them off, you're trying to be the coon X-Man, man. He's trying to be the coon mutant. Like, don't be like this, Roberto. So I love like them trying to get him out of that state of being the coon. He's like, right now he like Don Lemon. I feel like he gonna make like a transition.
Have a come to Jesus moment, just be completely different.
Jesus moment and be crazy. Yep, that's exactly what's gonna happen. He's Don Lemon right now. So yeah, I want to talk about that. But man, I love the opening fight sequence because first of all, we get Storm and Bishop together. Again, more black people. There's a lot of black people in the scene, y'all. It's lit. We get Storm and Bishop together. I really like that. But what was even more important is the entrance of Cyclops. Again, he is him, but we don't get to see that. We haven't really got to see that much. Evolution tried. Again, I have a whole Evolution soapbox. Evolution tried, but I don't think they succeeded either. Not like they're succeeding here. This is Scott Summers, that the one he's supposed to be. He's a square. Yeah, he is more militant. He's structured. He's a structured human being. But he could be cool because he's been here. He's done this. He's one of the first X-Men. He's the leader. And so he's literally zapping niggas with his eye beams. He's winking at the camera. You know what I'm saying? Like there's just so much charisma built up in there. And I think that's important in a leader, again, that we haven't seen, is that charisma part. That's kind of the part that's been missing. It's like, oh yeah, he's like that, but I like him because he's still likable. We've been missing kind of like that likable piece. So I really like his entrance here. And I thought it was a very important way to start the show because he's important. Cyclops is important. This journey he's about to go down is extremely important. So I thought that was good to establish his character as, again, not only the leader, but as somebody who can be cool in the right context.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. I think again, more resources, more budget, newer technology. You get to just see small stuff now done that wasn't achievable in 1994. You can see him using his optic blast. Like there was one part where I think he used his optic blast like to shoot at a guy's leg to throw him off balance, and then he shot him again in like the chest or something like that. It's small stuff like that you just you can't do that 30 years ago, but now they can do that because they have the resources and the proper budget to allocate towards making this look gorgeous, making it look and feel compelling and different and unique and just all the ways that I think you would want to see these characters depicted. And yeah, Storm, Bishop on top of the railway, going fucking crazy with their powers. Immediately she descends down from the heavens like the goddess that she is through the ceiling, and she gives that speech. It's like, oh my God, why are we just now getting this all these years later? Like this is what I should have been feeling for the past 25 years, and we've just never reached these types of highs. And automatically I think that they showed like, no, this is the X-Men for real. Like y'all are about to learn. If you don't know, these characters are not to be fucked with. They are some of the baddest, most interesting, most dynamic superheroes in all of comics, and that's why they've been such mainstays for such a long time. So I loved it. You also get another big moment too. Jean, she's able to, sort of use her powers to try to find more information about this the Sentinel tech. Gyrick is obviously the person behind it. She has this premonition, which is really dark. And it's not 100% clear what's happening here. And we can speculate, but I mean, there's so much scenery and so much vivid imagery that she sees. It's pretty horrific. There looks to be a graveyard. It looks like that there were potential callbacks to Dark Phoenix, maybe other callbacks to Days of Future Past. Like it felt like that there was a lot in there, but they don't really provide many answers. And there was also like a sand, like a manifestation of a human head in sand form that was kind of calling out to her, but you couldn't really make out who it was or who it might have sounded like or whatever the case may be. But you know, it kind of pointed to where they needed to go next in order to track down Bolivar Trask and Master Mold in order to defeat them. But what did you feel about that premonition, and what might it tell about maybe where the story heads over the next few episodes?
Yeah, I think of course there was a little past in it, as you mentioned, but there was a lot of foreshadowing and a lot of future there too. And I honestly don't want to give it away. It's a lot. Like it's a big rabbit hole to go down. If you know where they're going, but I think you kind of already said this too, but Jean and Cyclops are really about to own this season, like for real. Like it's about to be them a lot of the times, and you know, it's important to remember that Jean is a mother, and it's funny because seeing like this premonition happen is like it feels like something that would manifest in like a dream, or you know, later on her and Storm are talking and Storm just says to her like, no, you're just kind of being a mother. And I kind of feel like in some ways that's what that premonition was. It's like all the fears and insecurities that comes with that, but what that means for her future in the things that are calling out to her. So I thought it was a cool sequence, but there was a lot in there I think that's going to transpire throughout the season.
Yeah, it'll certainly be something that they revisit and call back to, and I think it'll become much more clear as the show heads towards the future, because they are directly adapting some very very famous stories in the season already. You can point to at least two or three that they're picking up from, with some of the events that happened, really mostly in episode 2, which we're about to get to, but they set the stage here in episode 1 as well. But I want to get to the final, you know, sort of big sequence that happened in this episode. You know, they find Trask. He's in a junkyard and he's trying to rebuild the Sentinels. And Master Mold is there, who was also in the premonition as well. That's the last thing that Jean saw before she perished in the premonition. But Master Mold is indeed real. And they track down Trask, and there's this huge action sequence that takes place towards the end of this episode, really with the entire team involved. But even before that, you know, they're flying the jet, and one of the Sentinels just grabs the jet. It cuts the jet in half almost out of the sky, and they all have to free fall from the jet and land on the ground. And you get the moment where Scott, you know, he invokes the name of this episode. He says, "To me, my X-Men." Before the fight, you know, how did you feel about that moment? Because everybody got to kind of have their own, as Deadpool would put it, a superhero landing. Everybody had their moment once that jet was cut in half by that Sentinel, and you just kind of see all of the team come together, really in this formation. You know, that's like the wallpaper for the entire series, to see the entire lineup, one X-Man, one mutant next to another.
You know, one thing that live action X-Men hasn't necessarily done like super great for me yet is in practice into performance. You know what I'm saying? Like the X-Men spend a lot of time in the danger room. Like a lot of time in the danger room. That's what they do. And even Jubilee talks about the danger room. She throws Roberto in there, you know, all that stuff happens. But this moment is one of my favorite, even though it's so small, because it's like, no, this is what the X-Men are supposed to be in terms of teamwork. And even before they get messed up, Cyclops is like, it's gonna take some teamwork. Can you do that, Logan? Blah, blah, blah. All that thing happens, and then immediately they're forced to go into it. They're forced to go into something that seems like they have practiced numerous amount of times. And so at the beginning, when they start falling, it's like, oh shit, they're falling. What are they going to do? But everyone kind of has a smirk on their face. And Cyclops is like, niggas, I see y'all on the ground. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all good. And everybody does what they need to do. Rogue is grabbing people. Storm is doing. It's just like, this is what the X-Men is supposed to be. We practiced this 18 times. Y'all thought we was gonna. You thought a broken helicopter was gonna do something to us. A broken plane was gonna do something to us. We've been here, and so I really like that small moment, because it's like, no, this is easy to us. And Cyclops dives and uses his beam to stop. He's him. Cyclops has been him. Like this is should not be news, but he is him. And then like you said, he invokes the "To Me My X-Men." Everyone lands, pieces doing flips behind him. If you look really closely, Storm does this thing with her hand the same time Cyclops' beam goes crazy. It's nuts. It's all nuts. I was like, this is the moment I got chills. Like I got chills. This is the second moment I got chills. The first time I got chills was hearing the song, the brand new opening, the intro, all of that. The second time I got chills when he said, "To me, my X-Men," and everyone pulled up like gang, and it was amazing. It was great.
Super fantastic, because even immediately when the Sentinel grabbed the jet, he cut it in half. Scott was like already ready because he fucking beamed him out of existence immediately after that. And then you see morph into Archangel to save the ones that can't fly, because a number of them they can fly, like Rogue and Storm, and they're gonna be fine. But there's a number of them like Logan who need help, and so Morph goes over and helps them. He grabs it, and that stuff is like, as you said, the teamwork that's really established well in advance of any of this stuff going on out in the field, to just seeing it come out into action, in this moment, and ultimately Scott using the optic blast to soften the landing. What a fucking visual to see him coming out of the sky, those optic blasts just taking up the entire screen, and then he just lands in perfect position, just ready to go, says, "To me, my X-Men." It was fantastic. It was really, I think, a way that we needed to see these characters that we just rarely see them, and that's truly as a team, and that's only the preface. That's only the appetizer for what comes next, because once they pull up to Master Mode and the Sentinels, oh folks, it gets even better. It gets even more fantastic, because they cue the music again, and then everybody is teaming up together to take out these Sentinels one by one, and there's so many moments, there's so much cool stuff that happens. I mean, Beast goes inside the heart of one and takes it over. Rogue is like judo flipping another one. Morph and Logan are continuing to work together. Morph, he turns into, what's the mutant name? The Blob. He turns into Blob, and Logan uses him as a springboard. It's just so much stuff that happens. It's like, oh my God, can you imagine, like, if they were able to translate this into a movie, a live action movie, what that could feel like if we eventually get to that point. But even before we get there, whenever that does come, like, this right here can stand toe to toe with what we've seen in live action. When you talk about those sequences of teams working together, I feel like there's some of the best realizations of comic book panels. Anytime we see the Guardians work together in a sequence, or the Avengers, or whatever the case may be, to see them come together and to just, like, one by one with the music in the background glaring in that way, it was just such a satisfying moment, and I think the perfect way to really wrap up the first episode.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about Team Up Anything is the actual merging of abilities. I'm even playing through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth right now, and something you couldn't do in the last game, you could do in this one. You can do combos with different people on your team. That shit is lit. It's like the combat has gotten better, and it feels like that in this show as well, man. Just being able to, because there's so many different permutations of all these people, of of everything that you can do. And like you said, we've only scratched the surface, man. And seeing Gambit jumped on Wolverine's back. This is like the nerdiest thing ever. He jumped on Wolverine's back and put his energy on his claws, and then he energy charged his staff, threw it at Logan, so he gets propelled into Morph as Blob. It's just like, are we serious? Like, what are we talking about? What are we really talking about? And then, of course, Cyclops says, "Give me the forecast." I almost threw something at the TV. How epic the part with Storm was, because it felt like the energy really changed, like in the show, in my house. Like, I think everything actually was everything. I had to see if I was watching anime. Like, everything got so dramatized and stylized that I was like, no, the goddess has really pulled up. It was one of the most beautiful sequences that I had seen in animation in a little bit, at least from like a American cartoon standpoint. I was like, what is this? But again, just knowing what these X-Men are capable of. This girl threw a glass tornado at the Sentinels. Where else are you watching that? You know what I'm saying? Where are you going to see that at? And so, man, I really like, again, this team dynamic actually showing up from, again, what has been years and years of practicing together. I love that we're finally seeing it come to fruition. It's great.
You know, even before Scott called her, what I love that they did, you had the Sentinels, they had the reading where they said Omega level threat. And
You put some respect on
and
it.
you know, when you hear Omega level threat, these are the most dangerous fucking mutants, the most powerful out there. Like, oh yeah, God is on the way. We better fucking run the other way right now because it's over if we stick around.
Yeah.
And you know, when she shows up, the whole mood and temperament changes because it's over. There's no more fighting. That's it. That is literally the atomic option. And so when Scott said that, you knew it was a wrap for everything that was happening there. So incredible stuff. And that leads to like the last moment of this episode, which will take us to episode 2, which is entitled Mutant Liberation Begins. But they teased this, obviously, I think, well in advance of the show. We knew it was coming. And this also adapts, you know, a popular comic storyline as well. But Magneto is now in charge of the X-Men, in charge of Charles' school. Charles has left this in his will, which, again, I don't know why he's writing a will if he's not dead. If we're not opening this will up, like, he got to be dead, I guess. I don't know. But they do something. It's not subtle, but, you know, even in the opening of episode 2, Charles is taken out of the intro and Magneto is put in, and he's put in at the front. He goes even before Cyclops is put in at the front of the intro as well. And so we're seeing this all come to fruition where Magneto is now turning over a new leaf. He's trying to become a different person. He's trying to follow in the footsteps of Charles and maybe take on a new perspective on mutant human coexistence. And what's interesting is that this is very consistent with where his character left off at the end of the animated series. I mean, you started to see a change in his character. I mean, he's growing out the hair. All of that stuff was starting to signal like this might be a different Magneto. And he's at the side of Charles even at the end of the animated series. You know, Charles says goodbye to everybody. And he looks at him, and Magneto is obviously sad and tore up about it. He's like, you know, this was my only friend. And now he's gone. And now we get to see him kind of step into this leadership role and take on something that, you know, of course, none of those other mutants ever thought would happen. They never thought he would be the leader of them or the school. But now he's becoming the face of the X-Men, the face of mutants, really moving into the future because there is so much political unrest, so many things that are happening across the country with the Friends of Humanity and the United Nations. All of that stuff is just like orbiting around this new leadership change that they're experiencing, and now Magneto having to step in as the face. And so what do you think about this? Like that final moment of episode 1, you know, him reading off the will and once again invoking those words, to me, my X-Men, almost verbatim. It was a brilliant stroke of writing. So I think the opening moments of episode 2, where we kind of start to settle in and see what role he's going to play in terms of being a leader for all of the X-Men.
Everything he built, everything he fought for now belongs to me, my X-Men. Wow. This dude Magneto is also different. I'm sorry. I've always loved Magneto. But I think he just evolved into something else in this show already. It's only been 2 episodes, but and I think that passing of power, like you just said, to me, my X-Men started with Cyclops and it ends the episode with Magneto, was like, whoa, what is going on? But that's literally how we enter episode 2, is the passing of the torch, kind of Magneto taking over, you know, what Charles has set forth for him. And it's weird. It is. And for everybody, for me watching, I was like, I'm looking over my shoulder like, is he supposed to be here? Like, this is crazy.
He got keys already to this damn mansion? Like, what's going on?
Keys already, but I love how everyone is so skeptical of him. How could you not be? Everybody knows the X-Men's biggest adversary is Magneto and has been for 5 seasons of the show. All of the 90s, all of the 2000s, all of the 20s. Like, this dude has not been very friendly to the X-Men at all. He has been their enemy. And so I think it is crazy to see how much the X-Men trust in Professor X. That's the crazy part. Like, they're literally going off nothing but the words that Professor X left of like, yeah, I'm going to leave this to Magneto. And everyone's like, well, shit. I mean, this is weird, but Professor X said so. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of crazy how everyone trusts Professor X that much that even in his absence, they're still like trusting their biggest enemy. I think that's so crazy, but something to reckon with. And like you said, at the end of the animated series, Magneto was already starting to change. And I love the changes that they, again, continue here. He's even dressing different. somebody said he looks cunty now, and I was like, he I was like, he do got that shit
Oh,
on. Like, I don't
you
know if y'all
do.
noticed, he got that shit on. He got a big ass M. That's like, I don't know.
He got
The
he got
fashion
that
choices are different.
he got that just for men in his hair. You know, he's doing it. He's definitely doing it these
He's
days.
doing it. He really is doing it, man. But what a crazy, I think, thing to happen. And again, them not really questioning it too much. Even in the meeting, even in a meeting with the X-Men after Magneto, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, I think, but Magneto was talking about how he got the mutants off from the Morlocks from the sewers to Genosha. Even in that meeting, he says, "My X-Men," and Cyclops is like, he just like kind of started making like small jokes, like, "Oh, I know what happened to them," but he never is like, "Dang, he took over my team." It's just like, "Oh, okay, I'm in the meeting too." You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought when I heard him say my X-Men, I thought we would get like a close up of Cyclops being like, "This nigga did not just say my X-Men," but we don't get that. Instead, we get like so much more trust than I expected. So yeah, it's a very interesting way, I think, to start the series.
Man, it's so brilliant to do this because we've gotten Charles and Eric together for such a long time in so many mediums. You know, we've seen that relationship over and over again, and it's always great. It's always going to be timeless because of how deep it goes. The fact that it's a friend and foe sort of rivalry that they have, and there's such a deep connection. But to now go into these places and to do something totally different that most people are not familiar with, and this to be the opening and the start really of the series and shaping how things are going to be. I think it's just a brilliant choice, because what better way do you just subvert all expectations, turn everything on its head, than to say, yeah, our biggest adversary is now going to have to become our biggest advocate and ally, perhaps, and we have to
Mm-hmm.
trust him, and we have to trust more so, in the words of Professor X and Charles Xavier, because that's the whole journey that even Scott has to go on, and that's where we see him by the end of the episode. Well, Charles trusted you, so I trust him, and that's where we're at. That's what it's going to be, and that has to be good enough for most people. That's going to have to be the resolution to this, because there have been so many things that have happened with Magneto over the years, bodies that have been lost, and blood that's been shed. It's hard to trust a man like that when they've been toe to toe so many times, but they have to understand and know, well, if Charles made this decision and wrote this in his will, then there has to be something there. We got to really buy into the words and believe him. And then you see that inner struggle, that inner turmoil that Magneto is dealing
Mm-hmm.
with. That's the best part of it, because he
Yeah.
himself is probably like, well, why did he do this? Like, yeah, I know him. That's my guy. We didn't always see eye to eye, obviously, but that's still my homie from day one. But I can't even wrap my head around this decision. Like, now I have to
Mm-hmm.
also grow and change and look at things differently. That's really tough, considering where he came from, knowing that he comes from such a harsh background, that he was tore away from his family. And we know the origins of Magneto. That's such a
Right.
that painted his life so drastically. That stuff is always going to be ingrained in him, and so he has to also go on a very difficult and challenging journey. And that stuff is just, I think it's ripe for incredible storytelling ahead. Before we get to the sort of the last moments of this episode, I want to quickly talk about, I think, one of the hallmarks, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, of really this show and future X-Men stories that we saw, but the love triangles are a fucking foot. They are here.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. The best thing about X-Men, I think, is that it really is a superhero soap opera. Like, at its
Yeah.
best, X-Men
Mm-hmm.
does these things exceptionally well. And we already kind of hinted at Jean, Scott, and Logan. That's been there, but now we're seeing another one develop, which again ties into Magneto and his presence in the show, because we see that him and Rogue are having a strong connection with one another. They have a relationship to some extent. They have a past together. Obviously, Gambit is kind of on the outside, very jealous looking at that, and he doesn't really understand what's going on. We see at the end of the episode, he's very much upset at their relationship and what they have. But Magneto is also kind of he's like the only person that can touch her, physically. He's the only one that's kind of figured out a way to be able to touch her. And so they have
Yeah.
a strong connection there. So what do you think about the formation of that love, possibly developing even more in this show? Any other thoughts about Gene, Scott, and Logan, where that might go, and just, overall the melodramatic stuff that we see out of the mutants?
Man, it is a lot. It's a lot. Was justice for Gambit, man. I almost wear my Gambit shirt just because of this episode. Rogue, man. one of my favorite characters because she's so layered. In in this episode when we do start talking about people or things that have been made to get rid of mutant powers, how could you not feel for Rogue, who can't touch anybody, who is only long to be touched, and now this guy comes along in Magneto, one of your biggest, your family's biggest enemy, and you can finally touch him. It's crazy. But also, this show gaslit me, bro. This show gaslit me into thinking. I said, wait a second, this was not a thing in the TV show. Like, I had to
I thought
I
the
was like,
same thing. I was like, wait, what did I miss? Like,
I said, wait, this is not a thing. And we were right. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were right. They adopted this the same way. This was a thing in the comics, which is funny because they also what's good about 97, they're adopting like the good things of the future, or like that happened in the comics, or that happened where like even this show took the Magneto wearing a helmet for his so he can't get to Charles Xavier. I love how the show took that, because that was always like, damn, that's a cool thing. That would make so much sense why he always has his helmet on. That wasn't the case in X-Men, the 90s animated series, but I love that they brought that over here. So yeah, I love how they're doing these small things to kind of like keep us up to date, but also keep us in the mix. But man, that love triangle is crazy. I feel for Gambit. I'm so sorry. Gambit has always been loyal to Rogue, bro. Like,
yeah,
just is what he's
true.
done, but he's also never been able to touch it. But so it's funny in that moment when he sees her, when he sees Rogue walk down the hallway with Eric, with Magneto, he has a Queen of Hearts in his hand, almost, bro. Come on, and he drops it in. Gambit, man, I'm so sorry, bro. My boy Remy does not deserve this. One of my favorite X-Men. He does not deserve this. But man, it really is crazy. And then the Jean, Logan, Cyclops stuff, I actually don't know what's going to happen, because if you know where this is about to go,
Yeah.
if you know where this is about to go, there's so much that they can do. And I'm not sure. But what is interesting is Logan delivered the baby. I was like, Logan got the baby delivered.
It's true.
And I thought, what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
he was there for the birth of the child. I think that's really interesting. But yeah, man, I don't know what they're going to do with them. But I'm very interested to see where they take it, because now there's like a whole nother, there's about to be a whole nother thing introduced that they have to deal with. So I'm excited to see where it goes, though. But yeah, I like the love triangles. I love the drama. Like you said, it's like a soap opera. Let's keep it going.
Absolutely. That brings us really to sort of the big third act of this episode, which is it's a really profound sequence. But we see the mutants and the X-Men and Magneto. They are going to the United Nations headquarters for the trial of Magneto. He was arrested by Valerie Cooper. We thought we might get a moment of Magneto destroying the helicopters, but he is working on himself. He's trying to be a different person. But he goes and he has his trial, which again is another big story that they adapt from the comics, the trial of Magneto, and some of those shots in this episode are recreated panel by panel. But we see the Friends of Humanity lead an assault on the UN headquarters, which if you were sitting there watching this episode and thinking like, this feels really familiar, some sort of insurgency at a Capitol government building, that feels weird. Yeah, January 6th, that definitely happened. So they definitely were calling back to that to just showcase the symbolism behind this militant, group, coming to storm a government official building. And in the midst of that, Executioner, I think his name is, the leader of this group of the Friends of Humanity. He has this incredibly powerful gun. He makes his way on the inside. We see Storm and Magneto working together while Rogue has to go take Logan to help deliver the baby, or take Cyclops, excuse me. Cyclops is still at the government building. Rogue actually takes Cyclops to go be present with Jean while she's delivering the baby. And so it's really just Storm and Magneto left behind. But if you're going to have somebody left behind, leave behind your two most powerful mutants, and they're able to kind of create a barrier around all of the people inside of the building. But Executioner, he's able to get in. He fires his gun, and it's headed for Magneto, but Storm steps in the way. She intercepts the blast, and it takes away all of her power. It completely wipes her of her mutant abilities, and it's a really, really emotional moment. How did you feel just seeing that happen, just over the course of like those few minutes? The attack, everything that's going on, it's just a lot happening. We're switching back and forth with the pregnancy and the delivery of Jean, and then ultimately that really, I think, emotional occurrence where we see we see Storm have to now deal with the fact that she's no longer, a mutant technically because of her abilities being gone.
Yeah, I knew something bad was about to happen. Because almost in every movie I have seen, with the birth of a baby comes something terrible. Almost every time, with life comes death. It's always like this yin yang push and pull thing that happens. And I was like, as soon as Jean was like, Logan, the baby is coming. Which also, do they not have a doula? Like y'all living like y'all like mutants in this house. I feel like
Yeah.
they should have a doula. I understand this is '97. Maybe doulas weren't that popular, but come on, man. Like y'all
They
know,
need
I feel
something.
like they need. Y'all shouldn't be driving to nobody hospital to deliver this baby.
It was also hilarious. One of my favorite moments where she said, "Logan, he's coming," and Logan's like, "Who? Apocalypse?" Like he's ready
Apocalypse.
to fight. His claws come out. I'm like, "Apocalypse? What? What are you fucking on right now?" And then he has to drive in his Jeep. He's obviously nervous as fuck. That was a good moment.
It's it was a good moment, man. I love that they made Logan do it. It was like, yeah, this is perfect. I love that they did that. But yeah, man, I knew something bad was going to go down. Executioner is just he's pretty popular. Not necessarily, I don't know if popular is the word, but he's pretty well known to just be like one of those reoccurring haters. It's literally what he is. He's a reoccurring hater, and here he is back again. With all of his racism, but he got the weapons to get the job done, man. And I knew something bad was going to happen, but for some reason, I did not clock that it would be Storm. They got me with the whole Storm losing her powers. They did. I didn't know what it was going to be, but that being it took a lot out of me, bro. It did. I almost paused it again. I didn't, but I almost paused it again just to like condolences to what was going on, because it was like really good acting in this moment. Where she's just like the air. She can't feel the moisture in the air after she loses her powers. And so that was just like, are we serious right now? Is this what we're doing? This is when I know this show was going to be something different. The way in which they delivered all of this. We had the action. It's going crazy. Everything's loud. Boom, blow to the gut. And I knew, I was like, yeah, this show is going to be something different. Taking a big risk like that. But it also felt like Storm is so powerful that it almost felt like we might need to nerf her a little bit in this moment, because who better than nerf than one of your strongest X-Men? And so, man, what a moment! But I'm like legit will never forget watching that for the first time. It was crazy.
Yeah, they giveth and they taketh away, because in the episode before we get one of the best moments that we've seen. I mean, even in the movies, Halle Berry couldn't stack up to what we saw in that first episode of X-Men '97. And immediately they're like, no, you can't have this. There's going to have to be a lot of work to get Storm back to where we know her to be. It's a really important arc for her and what type of journey she's going to go on. And it's only punctuated and even more poignant with the letter that she writes to Jean at the end of it, which is super sad. It's like, oh my God, because she's talking about how she doesn't have anything in common as much anymore, and she has to go on her personal journey and figure out who she's going to be now, and just all of these things, and the fact that she's happy for the birth of their child, but also now this is, as you said, a simultaneous moment where it's kind of a death of a piece of her. She has to become a new person, a new Storm. It's a really profound way to close out the episode. But maybe only matched by that is the moment that Magneto has. Obviously angered by what's happening here, he takes all of the representatives at the United Nations, the people that are having him on trial. He creates this energy field. He lifts them up into the Earth's outer atmosphere, taking them to space, along with Executioner, who he has sort of almost crucified up on this big shield that he took from inside the UN headquarters. And he's struggling. He is struggling in that moment to say, I should kill you motherfuckers right now for what y'all just did.
He's doing his best.
He's doing his absolute best. He says, I am trying to be better, like a tear rolling down his eye. It's taking everything in me to not smite you. Those are literally his words. I could smite you for what you did. I can show you how powerful I am. And the old me would do this. I would absolutely do this for what you just did. I would do it for a lot less, to be honest, because all I'm asking is that you acknowledge that we exist, acknowledge that we're here, that we're a part of this earth. We don't have to get along. We don't have to be buddy-buddy, but you have to coexist with us. And he's trying to follow in the footsteps of Charles and be a better person. And he leaves him with a chilling line. Don't make me let you down. that's what he says to them before he frees them, which is just like, Jesus Christ, this guy is terrifying. He can absolutely scare the shit out of you if he so chooses. How did you feel about just that moment, seeing Magneto, I think, really wrestle within that moment, just how to come to terms with everything that just happened?
Man, don't make me let you down. What a line. I just drew a small parallel in my head, really quick, where there is Jean was talking to Storm, that conversation again about Jean kind of low key like wants her baby to be human, and then later on come to find out now it's Storm indeed who has become the human. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is wow. Okay. But also, man, this dude Magneto, at least as far as we know so far, again, there was the moment where Cyclops was like, well, check him of every moment of every day to see if he's lying or not. We need to know if this nigga's about it. But also when he's talking to Dr. Cooper. Yes, Dr.
I
Cooper.
think so, yeah.
When he's talking to Dr. Cooper, Cyclops also says this thing where he's like, trust happens when actions meets words. And now this is Magneto showing his action. Magneto, he's like, all right, y'all, I could have done this. I could drop y'all into Earth right now. I came willingly. I literally had helicopters at y'all neck. I could pretty much do anything to you guys that I want to humankind that I want to at any moment, but I'm not. And because you took away the piece of Storm that made her her, it's literally in her name. We call her Storm. Of course, her name is Aurora Monroe, but her X-Men name is literally Storm. Like he even said early in the episode before all this goes down, he says, "Storm, you're the closest thing to a goddess that we will ever have." And comes to turn, she is like, I know this is very extreme, but in this moment she is like the Emmett Till, right? She is like the camel that broke everything because he's not going for it. And to make Magneto cry, you got to do something bad. And man, I think it was just really good writing. Everything he was saying was like, yep, that's a bar. Yep, that's a bar too. And as much as we've watched Magneto, this is one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is how he's going to be different. And so yeah, I like how he's shaking up the table, and I love the potential, of seeing what Magneto leading the X-Men could look like. That's what this is, and I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, I think that this episode and that moment really in particular is what the show is about, and really what the story is going to be about for this first season at least. I think that this is going to be all about not only Jean and Cyclops, of course, with their journey, because that moment, that birth of their son, is juxtaposed with the words that Eric is saying in that moment. I think that these are our A and B stories of this entire season, where we're going to be following the arcs that they in particular have to go on, whether it's Scott and Jean, or the clone, or now Eric and his leadership of the X-Men, and what that's going to look like, and how he's able to create hopefully a new era for them moving into the future, knowing that things are just such there's so much tension still around the mutants and their existence on Earth. And it was just incredible. Just again, exquisite, wonderful writing on the part of the team here. It was just so well done. The final moments of the episode, as they're reading Storm's speech, her farewell, at least for the time being, of the X-Men, somebody shows up at the mansion and knocks on the door, and it's Jean. It's another Jean that shows up at the door, and everybody's obviously very confused, but they leave it off on this somewhat of a cliffhanger. But there are deeper things here. There's more to be talked about with this doppelganger, with this look-alike. I want to pass it to you about what this could mean, because this moment really could retcon damn near everything we've seen up until this point. If they go in a certain direction, it could change like the whole makeup of X-Men, the animated series, leading into this show, depending on what direction they go in, because it's a couple of ways that they can play it. But
Yeah.
what might this moment of this doppelganger look-alike Jean showing up at the end of this episode, what might that spell for the future of the series?
Oh man. Again, I don't want to spoil it too much for people who are going to be TV show only. But what I will say is, there's a lot here. And there's a lot that is about to go down. What's crazy is that they might have just set up a big bad, maybe not for this season, maybe not even the next season, but they they might have just set up a pretty big bad, which is interesting. But also, it's time to start playing with your head as a viewer. I know that, but also, again, a lot of it's about the concept of family and what that looks like, who you actually love, uh, who you see versus who you feel. There's actually this small thing that happens in the episode that I need everybody to pay attention to. What happens is, Jean says something to Logan, that Cyclops told her, or the Cyclops told Logan. He was like, and she was like, "Dang, he didn't tell me that." And Logan was like, "Oh, there seems to be like a lot of that going around." I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! Was that what I think it was?" And I think the yeah, just take that with a grain of salt, as you will. I think Logan also feels and knows some things that he's not completely sold on himself, so he's not telling everybody, but he knows some things himself. And yeah, I think there's a lot here, and I think there's a lot of fun to be had with the upcoming story arc that they have set before us. So I'm pretty excited, because again, a lot of this hasn't been adapted into a cartoon yet or a TV show yet. Particularly this storyline hasn't been adapted yet, I don't think, as I'm thinking about it. But if they do this right, it could be fire. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, man, I'm really happy they're going this direction.
Yeah, it's wild actually. It really can change how we go back and look at that original show if they decide to make one key choice. I mean, yeah, the Dark Phoenix stuff plays into it, and what they did with that. Yeah, there's a lot they can do with that.
A
I'm,
lot.
I'm really I'm really looking forward to how they solve it. Before we wrap up, any other like small things you want to call out just about these first two episodes? Anything else you noticed that you liked? Characters that we didn't get a chance to talk about? I think the one big thing for me though is I
Mhm.
just love how 90s it feels. It feels very much like the
Yeah.
90s. Like there's that moment when they're playing basketball, and it's like
Hmm.
somebody got on a crop top storm. Her whole outfit looks
Yeah.
90s and neon, and Scott got a got a snapback on. It's like, yeah, this
Yeah.
this this definitely giving 97 for sure. So they nailed
No,
that.
they got that shit on. I love it. We were just talking about Akira Toriyama, how Dragon Ball characters always had that shit on. Now, like X Men kind of always had that shit on, but sometimes they go up and down, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, I love that. Other times it's like, ah, that's cool. They got that shit on now in X-Men 97, bro. Like they really are doing it. A couple things. I love the depth of this show. Like visually, like you were talking about some of the things you couldn't do in the 90s that you can do now. When Cyclops pulls up to fight the FOH, there's like he's doing things where he's like using his beam to go backwards, and you know what I mean? Like it feels
Yeah.
more, the room feels more 3D than it has ever felt. And I'm so happy that they could do that. I'm really happy to see the way the Sentinels are built. They did I seen an interview with the director, and he was talking about how just like in the 90s, Sentinels, you couldn't really like scale them how you're supposed to because of the way animation was. Like there was a Sentinel that was as big as a couple windows. There was one in the mall. There was one. You see Sentinels in all over the place, but their scale really isn't. It really isn't consistent across the board. Well, now they're able to do that. I can tell that now. Like I'm like, oh yeah, that Sentinel looks just as big as the last one. I love that they can do that. A couple more things I really like. Just this relationship between Roberto and Jubilee. I think that's really going to be something that manifests throughout this thing, and that it's going to be really important because Roberto, low key, Sunspot is a pretty cool ass X-Man, if you ask me. And so I can't wait till they get into that nitty gritty. And the last thing that I forgot about, Trash said something that was like super interesting to me. Again, that was very important in the writing, because a lot of times people are like, why do the humans hate X-Men so much? And he was like, you X-Men, y'all use your gifts to protect everyone, but all you do is really remind us that our days are numbered as humans and that humanity itself is obsolete. Like, you have no idea how it feels to be left by the future, like to be left behind by the future. And I was like, well, damn, that's some real shit. Like if you seen somebody next to you evolving, you're like, well, I can't. Like I just don't got the X gene. You know what I'm saying? What do you do in that moment, their choice is just to eradicate them, which is a terrible choice, right? But like, I think that's an interesting way to think about how some of these villains think. It's giving them a little bit more humanity versus like, I'm just a villain. So yeah, I wanted to throw that line in there. I thought that was really cool and really well written to think about how the humans think in this world of X-Men, man. But yeah,
Yeah, a lot of that comes from a place of fear. I mean, we see that in reality where people
absolutely.
they fear what they don't know, especially if it comes to, another life form or another person, whatever, something that
Mhm.
makes them feel out of use, out of step, or obsolete, as you said. I mean, that's definitely something that stokes that fear, and then it causes violence, hatred, race, all these things that we see come out and manifest in X-Men, which has just always been kind of at the forefront of the stories that they tell. So really, really incredible stuff ahead with X-Men 97. Folks, those are all of our thoughts on the 2-episode premiere. If you've checked this out on Disney Plus, hit us up and let us know what you think.